right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 157 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I am Billy Bob, and I've got my two regular co-hosts, Ian Kummer from a suburb in Moscow. He looks like he is back in his Moscow apartment. I believe it is 7 p.m. Moscow time. Carlo Parcelli is streaming live from Satan's Anus, Washington, D.C. It is noontime there in the anus. And we have Vladimir Golstein, our special guest. He is a professor of Slavic studies at Brown University. And we thank him so much for joining us. We had a fun title for today's episode. It's called, I can't even say it, it's called Anchorange Aquiescence. And that's a reference to Friday's meeting between Putin and Trump. I kind of predict that Trump is offering a formal surrender to Vladimir Putin, and that he's making an offer to Putin that Putin can accept. This was actually stated by one of the officials that works closely with Putin. I saw the video on Telegram, and he said, the United States offered us an offer that we think is acceptable. There's a lot of speculation about what that is, but if we recall that Trump gave a 50-day deadline, and then he quickly shortened that to 10 days. And obviously, in my opinion, he shortened it from 50 days to 10 days because of the military situation and how Ukraine wasn't going to last 50 days. So the Pentagon told Trump, hey, 50 days, by the time 50 days is up, there's not going to be much of a Ukraine military. So Trump cut it to 10 days. And then at day 8, we saw a surprise visit from Witkoff to Moscow. And that's when we saw the video that said, the Russian official said, the United States has offered us an agreement that is acceptable. And then we heard about the meeting in Alaska this coming Friday. Today's Tuesday, so Friday's just in a few days. And it seems that there's a lot of consternation in the Western press. I know the Telegraph, the British periodical, really supported my own analysis and saying the same thing. Hey, we're worried that Trump is going to surrender. If Trump surrenders, that's bad. There goes our values, right? So I don't know. It's going to be a struggle, right? I think Trump is going to have to fight with people if he's really serious about making an offer that Russia can accept. But I want to go to Vladimir. Vladimir, do you think it is possible that there is going to be an offer made by the U.S. that would be acceptable to Russia, and Russia would then agree to a freeze in the conflict and an immediate what is it called when you have the ceasefire? An immediate ceasefire. Do you think that is possible?
Well, I think it is possible because Russians probably, as a state, as a historic entity, know its strengths and weaknesses and are capable of compromising. So they will figure out. Of course, it doesn't doesn't meet all Russian expectations. The original purpose was to demilitarize Ukraine, to denazify, that is, to have people in the government which are not, maniacs, which are not resurrecting the ghosts from the Second World War and not celebrating all these heroes who were murdering Poles and Jews and so on. So they're not accomplishing that. Another goal, which was half stated, half understood, is to protect Russian speakers and, kind of people who identify themselves with Russia, and they live more or less along this kind of eastern side of Dnieper River, and that includes people in Odessa and people in Nikolaev. So Russians probably will give up this idea, even though Odessans of all people paid very dearly for kind of freedom. There are 50 people burned down there in Odessa. They're suppressed. So, I've heard so many Russians who are not happy with kind of ceasefire right there, because they feel that they're betraying Russian speakers of Odessa and all this Black Sea coast. But politics is the art of the possible, and that's what sort of I think Putin wants to do. So he will probably willing to freeze the the conflict where it is, liberate this eastern Ukraine territory, what the Russians call Donbass, that is Donetsk and Lugansk region. They will be part of Russia. And he also hopes to get some other kind of carrot from Trump, that is maybe lifting of certain sanctions, trading, and so on. But of course, Trump is the the great artist of deals. So he obviously wants to get something for himself there. I can't imagine Trump not getting something. So we can discuss it later on in details. The Ukrainians also will probably stand certain things to gain, provided they can look at things objectively, because they could lose much more territory. So Ukrainians basically can, accept endless amount of help from their European partners, much less probably help from United States. But so I think the potential for working out a deal is there, for at least for the short term. How it will eventually unfold is remain to be seen. But I'm relatively positive, because I hope that people will be realistic.
Can I ask your opinion on, your personal opinion? Would you be happy to see it into the fighting, or do you think it's going to be a temporary thing where the West is going to try and regroup and become stronger and come back at Russia, at a future date with a more successful strategy? Like, are you going to be angry at Putin because I think there's going to be a lot of Russians and a lot of people around the world that might be calling Putin, saying that he's foolish to accept Minsk III. Do you see things like that?
I see people being uneasy and unhappy, but things can change. And I foresee somehow kind of if Ukraine is not joining NATO and is not providing a threat, and things begin to kind of pick up between first Russia and US, and then maybe Russia and the EU, this conflict might kind of dissolve, because that is, after all, Ukrainians will have support from EU. They have the full chance to become a really democratic country, less Russophobic, economically viable. So because as of now they exist on some kind of very crazy war mentality, siege mentality, that the sky is falling, we have to fight Russians. This is not a healthy life. We know that Ukrainians are running away from the country. They refuse to join the army. So I can see that them benefiting, and if they benefit, they become less kind of military kind of oriented, and EU eventually will probably will make sense to them too, because there are so many issues in Europe, including inflation, including this and that. So why on earth they should keep on pouring money down the corrupt Ukrainian regime is not clear. So I think I think it has a potential to work out and make. We see in history, my favorite example is this territory of Alsace between France and Germany, and it was like going from back and forth, endless amount of brutal wars in the 1870s and so on and so forth. But now it's sort of settled, and French and Germans are now just the best buddies. They were fighting each other for centuries. So I think it's kind of easy. I don't see some kind of inherent problems to this issue.
Ian and Carlo.
Go ahead, Ian.
Well, I think as far as the ceasefire goes, if you look at historically, what was the difference between a successful ceasefire like World War One and a failed ceasefire like Minsk 1 and 2? Well, like World War One, there was an immediate and unilateral concessions by Germany. They started demilitarizing. They withdrew from French and I think Belgian territory. Even before the negotiations took part, they demobilized. They did all this stuff. They did a lot of stuff that and those were also steps they couldn't really reverse. Like Germany at that point could say, well, we actually want to keep fighting, but they'd already given up all their positions in France. And then there's the armistice in Korea, which was 1953. And I bring that up specifically because, one, it's a favorite ceasefire for pro-NATO people. Bring up, it's like, oh, look, ceasefires can work without freezing the conflict, and all that. But if you look at it, even if you look at the Wikipedia page, you'll see the signatories for that armistice were the USA, North Korea, and China. What wasn't a signatory was South Korea. No one even pretended that South Korea was a player, and it was just a conflict between North Korea and China and the USA. I think that's going to raise the question. If Trump says, okay, well, Ukrainians have to withdraw from, and it was unclear, because we haven't had the meeting yet. I've seen both explanations. Some saying they're going to withdraw from all claimed Russian territory, and some just saying they're going to withdraw from Donbass. But are they going to do that? Because the question is how much control does Trump have over the Ukrainian war effort? And if Trump pulled the plug, how serious would that be for the Ukrainian war effort with the problems it already has? If Trump just said, we're pulling the plug, no more GEOINT, no more satellite, no more support, logistical support, and all this stuff goes away, is Europe going to be able to fill that in? And so I don't know. But the thing is, when you two heads of state like Trump or Putin meet in person and shake hands, is typically when there's an agreement already made, right? So everybody's already agreed, and that's just a formality. So that's what this implies. I mean, there's exceptions, like when Zelensky came to the Oval Office, and I do think that was actually what it was intended to be. As everybody was like, okay, Zelensky's going to agree to the mineral deal, is going to sign it, but then that's what little Rubio had told Trump. It's like, okay, Zelensky's on board with this deal. He's going to come in and sign it and shake hands, all this stuff. And then Zelensky came in and played hardball, got all aggressive, and it turned into that shouting match. It was very unusual. I don't think that was good.
Great theater.
It was great. So I don't know if it was necessarily a trick. I do think Rubio looked genuinely surprised when Zelensky came in and said, actually, no, I don't want to sign it. It's like, having a wedding. And, does anyone have a problem with this? Someone actually standing up and say, yes, I don't think this union should happen. That's unexpected when it does happen. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So, Carlo, what do you think?
Ian made my main point for me, too. These negotiations don't take place in a vacuum. There's been advanced teams talking. How long they've been talking, we don't know. So it is, in one sense, heartening that the two, I hesitate to call Trump a leader rather than just a fool, but that they're getting together at Seward's Folly of all places, which is what they initially called the purchase of Alaska by Henry Seward. And I disagree with Billy Bob about the reason that Trump went from 50 days to 10 days. I don't think it has anything to do with the Ukrainians running out of the will to continue the combat. They've been tenacious now for years, much way beyond what people had predicted, and I don't think that would have occurred. I think the 10 days just had to do with the fact that it was made clear to Trump that there was no movement on the Russian side with this threat of 50 days and then more sanctions. There was just no movement. So 10 days was the kind of rash decision that Trump makes because he's a rash asshole who shoots from the hip, knows nothing. I mean, I remember when Ian was here one show, Trump came on and called rare earths raw earths. You know, it's like he'd been told about them like 20 minutes before he went public, so he didn't even know what they were. This is the kind of fool you're dealing with. So when you sit down with that kind of a person, and the people around him are just as quixotic, many of them, it could all blow up. It could all blow up in everyone's face, and I wouldn't hold my breath. But I do think that any complications will come primarily from the Washington side.
David K is wondering why you're being so nice to Trump this morning, but we'll leave that alone. Any thoughts, Vladimir?
Yeah, there is one statement which belonged to some kind of German politician. I don't know whether Bismarck or somebody. So he said, Russia is never as weak as its opponents or kind of critics claim, nor is it as strong as its proponents declare. And I would say that's true about Trump. He's not as foolish as many people who don't like him, claim. Now, no, he is, of course, a natural genius, as he himself believes, or these blondes from Fox News proclaim. But he is basically a very savvy guy, and I say it, after kind of thinking and contemplating that, because look what he managed to accomplish in his own terms for himself, maybe for United States, for imperialist wing of United States, but he accomplished it in a negotiation between Armenia and Azerbaijan, because that was a very contentious, issues there. Armenia and Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan is held by the Turkey. Russia is too busy with Ukraine to be fully engaged there. So Armenia feels that they are kind of exposed. So they desperately using all their diaspora Armenians who live in the States, who live in France. They begin to sort of hustle for some kind of negotiations. Trump says, "Okay, I'll guarantee some kind of a peace, there." But Azerbaijanis get piece of land, and I, as American president, will put our feet on the ground there in Caucasus, which actually throws everything in disarray as far as the stability of the region is concerned. Because Iranians are not happy, Russians are not happy. Iranians and Russians were more or less in the Armenian side, and not even Azeris and Turks are happy because they were hoping to move in. Trump sort of put his feet in. So I think he's actually very savvy in this sense. As somebody who is sympathized to Russia, I feel he kind of outsmarted them. He has outsmarted them, and he used this opportunity of the conflict by, like the same thing he did in Kosovo when he put, all the Serbian-Albanian conflict. All right. What Americans did, they put their military, base. That was American tradition. So he kind of continues with it. So he is, so I suspect he'll be sitting there in Alaska and say, okay, Ukraine, war, fighting, I want to stop it, but what is it for me? And he will definitely negotiate something for himself. Either he'll make some kind of great deal, buying Russian oil and selling it to Russian gas, or selling it to EU for a lot of money, because he can pull the stunt of all people. Or some people suggest that he wants to make a deal with Russia vis-a-vis Arctic, because Arctic has tremendous amount of gas and oil and everything. So when you think about Trump, he has certain fixations. His fixation is on Greenland and Canada. This is all to get access to Arctics, to the kind of territory which you can explore. So he might sort of make some kind of deal with Russia, which will be actually to the detriment of China, because we talk about this and that, but Trump is aware that the greatest rival to the United States is China. So he probably figures it out. So maybe it makes sense to me to make some kind of deal with Russia, get something for US, and more or less secure certain forces and certain access to resources vis-a-vis China. So Chinese are justifiably nervous about that, as say Iranians were nervous when Trump got into between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So he's not a fool. He knows what he wants to do.
So where was I going to go with that? So I think he's a deal maker, right? So the transatlantic alliance that was in power and calling the shots prior to Trump were definitely principled anti-Russia. They were Russophobes. The whole plan was to destroy Russia, make it at least 3 different countries, steal all the resources, and weaken Russia tremendously. And that was the objective. That was the goal. That was the whole point of the color revolution in Ukraine. Turning NATO training, the Ukrainian military, and really unleashing them against the Russian speakers in the Donbass. All of that was to, have a forward operating base from with which they could destroy Russia. But it is only because of Russian competence, economic competence, and military competence that this effort failed. And Trump understands this. He understands that Biden's efforts have failed, and there is no economic and there's no military plan to defeat Russia. They've lost. Russia has won. They didn't know that Russia would be so competent. They probably thought there was a good chance that they could break apart Russia. They could get the Putin regime out of there, break Russia apart. But my train of thought is it's difficult this morning to maintain. The reason that they were willing to roll the dice on this effort because there was no downside to trying to attack Russia, to trying to have this forward operating base in Ukraine against Russia. What is the downside? You lose 1 million Ukrainians. Nobody gives a fuck about the Ukrainians. That just means you're going to have more Ukrainian women to exploit in Western Europe as housekeepers and prostitutes. That's the calculation that Western policymakers came. So their children aren't going to die. A lot of those Ukrainians are neo-Nazi types anyway, which again they really don't care about. So they rolled the dice and they lost. And so Trump's job here on Friday is really just to manage the West's capitulation to this reality in a way that is least damaging to Western interests. And so I agree with Vladimir. They can come to an agreement. Trump's goal is to get the best deal possible for the West. But the only reason that this is happening, the only reason we're seeing this is because Russia has won. Russia has won on the battlefield, and Russia has won the economic war. And I think that people need to understand and appreciate that. And they should be angry. They should be angry at the West for initiating this whole thing that they lost. It's like Vietnam. It's like you do this huge thing in Vietnam. You kill millions of people, 50,000 U.S. people for fucking nothing, for absolutely nothing. And it's the same thing with Ukraine. It's like I really want to hold these people accountable. These people that have caused the deaths of a million Ukrainians. There should be some accountability. Really upsets me that there's no accountability for them. But I'm thankful for the competence of the Russian government. And I think Trump's going to struggle. Trump's going to struggle against the still powerful transatlantic alliance that is virulently Russophobic, and they really don't want to give up on, even temporarily. They don't even want to temporarily give up on this effort to destroy Russia. They want to maintain it. Of course, they don't have any cards. They don't have any option, and Trump knows that. But this is Trump's struggle. Carlo, you have a thought?
Yeah, I just want to interject. We got a place. We're using the word Trump a lot. The name Trump. It's meaningless. The guy's a puppet. Anybody who lived through Ronald Reagan and was an adult could see what a total puppet looked like. Harry Truman. Jimmy Burns had strings on Harry Truman. That's why we had the 2 atomic bombs. So forget Trump. He is a fool. He's an idiot. He's been told what to do. He's taken money from people that have a great deal of influence on him. And his job is to simply go out and put himself forward and not fuck everything up, which he's very capable of doing. So, I mean, the Russians, I don't understand why they even want to have this meeting. You have Georgia. You have the USAID in its rump form, still trying to destabilize Georgia. That's the U.S. trying to destabilize another country on the Russian border. And they're negotiating with Trump on Ukraine about Ukraine being on the Russian border. It doesn't make sense to me. Something's not quite right about all of this. I don't have a lot of faith that anything is going to come out of this unless, like Vladimir says, it's profitable in some way personally to Trump, and he can get away with it. But
Vladimir, do you think, the direct question, do you think Trump can overcome the the Russophobic, tendencies of the large faction of the Western, imperialist class that don't want to see a negotiation? They want to maintain this aggression. They don't even want a temporary halt, and they don't want to undo the sanctions. I mean, can Trump get around those people?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. This is $6,000 question. It's an important question. And I think, when Carlos says that Trump listens to the people, he might be a puppet. He might be listening. But I think there is a big division within the United States and within ruling elites and ruling classes. Some are probably primarily Democratic. They are fairly and squarely in this Russophobic camp. This is like Hillary Clinton, who believe, and before that, who believed that Russia is weak. I remember one of the documents which was, published by WikiLeaks, when somebody asked her what if Russians will interfere in our American plans in Syria, and she just dismisses Russia, saying, "Oh, they didn't interfere in Serbia, which was so important for them when we were bombing Serbia and smithereens. They wouldn't do anything." So this is the attitude. Russia wouldn't do anything. We can dismember them. We can, put economic sanctions. We can use Ukraine as a kind of a ram to destroy it. And, then once we sort of dismember Russia and put our hands on Russian resources, we can proceed, with something. This is one group, and they're still very strong. I suspect like a majority of State Department, majority of Pentagon, majority of sort of, this ruling class, ruling elite, they still kind of more or less subservient to this idea, because it was Cold War. It was very much ingrained in American mind that Russia is the enemy and we have to. Yeah. But I think there are enough smart Americans who are traveling around, who are dealing with economics, and they see the rise of China. They see that China is a real rivalry. So while we are like trying to pick up sort of stuff with Russia and doing it, Russia is, with all its resources, with all its kind of power, with all its whatever, is moving into the Chinese kind of hands, and the Chinese are getting stronger. So we need to do something. So this is another group of people which put their pressure on Trump. So, I don't know, and I'm not sure he's very smart, but he's still, at least he's smart enough to listen to both groups. And as you started, I don't know, we've seen him during his first rule. He wanted to do something, and then he just fall back to this Russophobic group and start acting up like one of them. Maybe this time he said is enough. I know they're starting all this, Russiagate. They're starting issuing subpoenas to all this, from people from Obama to Adam Schiff, to all these crooks who just, were trying to weaponize and milk the whole idea of Russians interference in elections, so on. So I think the jury is still out about, Trump, and whether he would listen to the group who would say, who would say, let's it's better, it's pay off to be friends with Russia and stop the killing and be Ukraine in the kind of already bigger than the historical borders. Ukraine is already bigger than it used to be, so on. So let Ukraine deal with their own situation, and we're better off being in good terms with Russia and the resources, and then confront China, than just let the whole thing collapse.
As far as Trump goes, it can all be about the Epstein files. He's just trying another evasion. He doesn't. To him,
he wants a big media frenzy, so he doesn't have to keep asking questions about Epstein.
It could be the Epstein files.
A distraction.
I'd like to remind everybody, I've been saying this for about 2 years now. I've been telling you guys on this show, and some of you have been skeptical, saying I was being too pessimistic. But for the past about 2 years, I've been in summer 2025. That's what I said. I was also sure that Biden was going to win the election when I said that, too. I said it didn't actually matter who won the election, because that was when I thought it would become untenable and also politically inconvenient in the USA, and they would want an exit ramp. So maybe, maybe Epstein plays into it. I think the Epstein files are more significant with Iran than with Russia, because I do. I said this a couple shows ago. I do think we're going to have a round two with Iran. It's very interesting because Putin and Netanyahu have been talking. They've had several conversations, and I don't think we know exactly what was said, but I think it was. At one point, it was said that S-400s are now in Iran, and so that attack that Israel said can't be repeated. You also have all this going on, like Vladimir said, all this stuff going on in our media. So it might it's entirely possible that we're seeing a shift from Ukraine to Iran. In fact, which is funny because if you asked me a few months ago, I'd say, no, there's no way we're going to go to war with Iran. There's no chance. There's no chance at all, because, that major ground invasion that we did in 2003 could not be repeated. It's not demographically possible. It's not financially possible. It's not militarily possible, but now I'm questioning myself, maybe they are actually going to try it. I don't know.
Well, okay, before we shift to the Mideast,
we don't have to shift to the Mideast. I was just bringing that up as a reason
I want to, and that kind of is a good segue. Okay. But before we do that, let's just wrap up the whole Friday issue. So Friday could turn out several ways, right? Like, it could be nothing is really decided and things remain up in the air until they adjourn for another meeting in another week's time or several weeks' time. Alternatively, you could have a kind of situation where Putin, again, is intransigent, and Trump leaves that meeting saying, hey, Putin doesn't want peace. We've got to do what we can, but, I can't make him make peace. He's refusing to make peace, and Russia's the problem. I am so angry. And then from there, he could just continue to sell weapons to Europe, and Europe can take over the proxy war. So I see that as an option. Alternatively, they could overcome the Western obstacles to a more comprehensive kind of ceasefire, one that Russia could agree to. And once, they agree to that, it's going to have to include sanctions relief, but it would also have to include Ukraine moving their troops to the west of the Dnieper River, right? I mean, and so can you put pressure on Zelensky to do that? I think it's possible. So you could have a more comprehensive kind of framework that would allow Putin to agree to an immediate ceasefire. But and of course, if Russia does agree to that, I would support it because I have competence in Russian diplomacy, in them knowing their own best interest, and in also knowing that, hey, we can always come back right where we are now with our very powerful military machine, which we have built up, which is rolling right now on Ukraine, and we can always come back to that point. You know, if the West proves to be intransigent and if they are giving us nothing but lies, hey, at least we gave them the benefit of the doubt, and they stabbed us in the back again. What other kind of options are there, Vladimir, from outcomes that are possible?
I think that Trump honestly is tired of giving money to Ukraine. He doesn't see any benefit of that. So he's actually willing to, if he makes some kind of agreement with Russia about certain things, and Russia understands it. So I think Putin is not going to be totally intransigent. Of course, if he tells him take all, return every piece of land for which so many Russians died, and just give the land and betray Russian speakers, Putin would say no. But if he gives them kind of more or less like satisfactory conditions that those who were fighting for joining Russia will be able to join Russia, all this Donbass region and demilitarization, that Putin will be willing sort of to compromise, and Trump will be happy if he makes some kind of a deal. Maybe they sign some kind of a right to explore some Arctic oil. Yeah. Trump will come as a winner, and then he would say, and Zelensky is stubborn, I'm not giving them, giving him a penny. If Europeans want to buy our weapons and pay for that and give it to them, it's their kind of decision. So that's ideal situation, but I think it might happen.
Well, I mean, what other way is Trump going to get the Nobel Peace Prize? That is the way Trump will earn his Nobel Peace Prize. The West might be so angry with him if he does come to a fair agreement, though, that he would actually never then get the Nobel Peace Prize because it's such a rigged award anyway. But no, I appreciate that. For me, I'm happy. We can move on to the Middle East, unless you guys have other comments on this Friday event and the Ukraine situation. But we can definitely pivot to the Mideast.
I think if I can add, it's probably the reason that the West, Europeans are resistant to that is because for starting from 2014 even, and the last 3 years of the war in particular, they were lying to their public through the teeth. They were lying about, what's going on in Ukraine, and the public knows there is, refugees from Ukraine run around in Poland, in France, getting all this help, misbehaving, screaming and yelling, let's fight the war while they're hiding in Ukraine. Public knows, but the elite keeps on lying, keeps on saying we're fighting for democracy. So if there is some kind of a deal is achieved, the ruling elites of Europe are finding with a pie on their face. So it's very difficult for them to acknowledge we were wrong. And Trump, whom they actually keep on mocking and dismissing, actually outsmarted. So they will resist. They will put all kinds of resistance to that, but I think they also have a lot of domestic issues at home, from inflation to economic inequality. So maybe they will say, "Okay, let's proceed." But Europeans are the ones to watch actually in this conflict.
Yeah, they have no ability to deal with the Russian, war machine, for lack of a better term. Like they don't have a military, and it would take them, years to create a military that could threaten Russia and protect Ukraine. And it would involve slashing the social safety nets and really pissing off the people, because all of the domestic spending would have to go into military spending. And, Europe doesn't seem like the kind of guys that want to do that. I mean, Scott Ritter always makes fun of the fat Germans that are definitely not military ready. And so it would take years, and it would piss everyone off, and it would any government that tries to do that would lose power very quickly. So they really don't have an alternative path, and that's why peace, some kind of peace, seems like it's necessary. And then the question is, what are the terms? And of course, Trump is going to be pressured to give as few terms as possible, but Russia has a lot of cards. So no, it'll be very fascinating on Friday to see what happens. But I think the important thing is that it's only thanks to Russia and their competency that we're even here. And shame on the West and the United States for murdering 1 million Ukrainians and causing all these problems. And there ought to be accountability, but there never will be. So, Vladimir, you brought up Iran. You brought up the Caucasus, Armenia, Azerbaijan. This seems like more maneuvering of the West to further encircle Iran and also threaten Russia as well. But with the Iran specifically, I agree with Ian. It's very likely that we could see another resumption of hostilities by Israel, as a U.S. proxy, starting trying to damage Iran's economy and their military, and probably their nuclear production, their energy production facilities. So do you think that we're going to see another resumption of hostilities before the end of the year, Vladimir?
This is such a fascinating question, because Trump, being a pragmatist, he probably, could have seen that it sort of, again, makes sense to somehow make a deal, negotiate. But, I don't know what his relationship with Netanyahu. Netanyahu is that set of stirring shit and fighting Iran. But I still think that, maybe in the United States' interest is actually to have good relationship with Iran. Are they ready for that? Or are they continue, how many kind of traditional rules, of United States Trump can overthrow? Maybe at this moment, in terms of Iran, he'll buckle up even more ready than to Russophobic lobby. He'll buckle up to pro-Netanyahu lobby and start saying, let's bomb Iran. I don't know. But I think it's there is no point in Trump stirring more trouble there as well, unless I can imagine them. This is a giant nation, 100 million population of Iran. With they cannot conquer that. So it's going to be the biggest mistake if he engage in that. And he already done what he showed something. He appeased Netanyahu. So I hope he's not going to push it. The question is, of course, I would put it another way. I just recently read a review of some Iranian general who actually said, we're not going to tolerate United States on our border near Caspian Sea, because that will really make sort of the reconfiguration vis-a-vis Caspian Sea, putting Americans and Turks there rather than traditional Russians and Iranian. So one hopes that Iran is not going to start acting kind of, assertive, and then Trump will sort of let it slide, because the Middle East by itself is complicated. There's nonsense going on in Syria. So does he really need to bring Iran to the picture? I hope not.
Carlo, Ian, before we totally monopolize all the time, you guys.
Well, I just wanted to say that the Azerbaijan-Armenia truce, and that comes into focus. That makes more sense when you consider it in the context of Iran and the geographical position of those two countries, and the fact that the United States signed a 99-year lease on that stretch of land, basically to at least a large part of it was to block any free flow of Russian goods to Iran and vice versa. It's true.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I agree with everything.
And allegedly, the claim is that the United States will defend that, their 99-year lease with mercenaries. So they're going to hire an army. And I wouldn't want to be a part of that mercenary army because they're going to get targeted. And I think, that's what the Iranian general was threatening. It's like, we're just not going to allow that. So, it's a big mistake. I think Iran is strong. And, I think it's possible that Israel might continue to try to draw the United States into a major conflict with Iran because Israel knows it is only the United States if they, engage in this huge undertaking of destroying Iran. But it's going to be way bigger than our effort to destroy Iraq. And obviously, Trump understands that's not in the U.S. interest to do. And yet, Israel is going to keep trying to do that because ultimately that's their only option that they have to become the regional hegemon and to achieve greater Israel and to really be able to take care of Hezbollah and Hamas, who, Iran supports. So, but then Iran has Iran wants to get along with the U.S., but not if the price is to throw the Palestinians or Hezbollah under the bus and to acquiesce to, Israeli hegemony in the region. Like Iran doesn't want peace that much, and that's the problem. Because if Iran wanted peace that much, they would just be like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. But they're principled, thankfully, and they're refusing to allow this colossal injustice, not just the state of Israel, but what the state of Israel is doing to their immediate neighbors while they pursue their greater Israel agenda. But Vladimir, I know that you're not as angry at Israel as I am.
Yeah, that's all true. I think I'm more angry with Netanyahu rather than kind of Israel. But I definitely think that without first of all, let me back off, and it might be a nice bridge between our first half an hour and this half an hour. I think basically both Netanyahu and Zelensky, the only way for them to stay in power is to have wars and to stir more and more trouble. That is, once there is a peace deal, if there is a peace deal in Ukraine, Zelensky will be kind of out because he kind of didn't, he was actually, if you remember, he was voted in by Ukrainian people because he was promising to sort of make some kind of a deal and stop this bloodshed and murder, as a result of which Ukrainians lost in life, in refugees, giant amount of population. They complain that, Stalin killed them. Whatever Stalin sort of destroyed was like counting, say 500,000. They already lost like 12 million people left Ukraine. Before the whole conflict, population was 40 million. Now it's 28. So, so Zelensky, the only way for him to stay in power is to say that I am the war president and I'm tough and I'm this and that. If there is a peace, so Netanyahu is the same thing. But I see that there is a potential for negotiate. Once you sort of throw Netanyahu out and his kind of mania about Iran, I don't foresee any kind of obstacles to comprehensive kind of agreement. And I hope also that Iran understands it. There is there is a potential there if they sort of got everyone involved. China probably should be involved. Russia should be involved. United States should be involved, and they can solve it rather than just keep on stirring trouble on both sides. Israelis provoking Iran provoking Israelis by giving money to Hamas. So that's not a winning situation.
Can I disagree with you on this, Vladimir? Because I don't think Netanyahu represents anything different that Zionism has represented for its entire existence. So Zionism has always been predicated on achieving the largest geographical area possible with the largest Jewish majority possible through the use of terrorism, ethnic cleansing, and land theft. I mean, this is just the history of how Israel came into being, and we can see it continuing today. What they're doing in Gaza, what they're doing in the West Bank is exactly that. It's terrorism against the people that have lived there for 2,000 years. And the whole point is to get them to leave and take their land. And I mean, most Israelis support that. They're for that. All the governments have been engaged in that project, in that process for the last 5-6 decades. So I don't see, who's the peacenik that's going to come behind Netanyahu? Shamir or Rabin, right? Rabin was assassinated, I believe, because he was maybe a little bit serious about negotiating a two-state deal. But go ahead, Vladimir.
Yeah, that's the person I wanted to mention, Rabin. He was a general. He was a tough guy, but he managed to negotiate. And there is a big segment of Israeli population who actually want to live in peace. I'm not saying that the situation is very simple, and I'm not saying that the whole aggression is just brainchild only of Netanyahu. Of course, there is, a lot of Israelis, and, this reality of their kind of coalition government is such that he has to deal with this kind of right-wingers who keep on pushing for like historical or whatever. But there is a fair amount of Israelis who kind of see things differently. So they who want to sort of, they were, again, generals. There was one general who was also killed, who wanted to realize that we need to have two-state solution. His nickname was actually Gandhi, very well-known, general who was killed too. So there is, it's a complicated country, and there are different forces. So I don't see that just one side is only speaks on behalf of everyone. So there'll be like, I'm sure that there are enough people, especially nowadays, but also, of course, Netanyahu rides the wave of anger of Israelis against this Hamas attack. So he, it's a complicated situation. But I think a good politician, of course, United States, is not a very honest peace broker there. But still, I can imagine some other countries, maybe China, can bring some kind of, a compromise which can resolve various issues. Of course, Israelis have to stop building more settlements and provoking more. But there are enough. I've been in Israel many times, and I speak to all kinds of people, and it's the most diverse society I've seen. They have the more diverse opinions than Americans or Russians or anyone.
Yeah.
They cover all the spectrum. So I wouldn't say that all Israelis just
no, that's fair,
go to
but
bed dreaming, let's kill Arabs and get their land.
The point, though, is that, Israel's not a democracy. The United States is not a democracy, and public opinion just doesn't matter. That's not how, reality works. That's how liberal imagination works. Liberal idealism is, we're a nation and we have a representative government. In real life, though, that's not the situation. In real life, you have a division between the two classes, and the working class majority has interests that are different than the ruling class, the ownership class. And so in Europe, you see the same thing. You see the governments representing the Western imperialist oligarchs, and you see them putting in policies that benefit the Western imperialist oligarchs, or at least their own perception of what their interest is, to the detriment of the masses. And this is just how liberal democracy functions, as essentially an oligarchy. And so I would dismiss what the attitudes are of any given Israeli, because they don't have the political power, just like I would dismiss the aspirations for peace and prosperity in Europe and in the United States, because their governments really don't represent them and don't care. And so, I don't see any powerful faction within Israel, prepared or wanting peace. They're more interested in either getting the United States to destroy Iran, or, they have their Samson doctrine of, if we can't, live in this world, then nobody else will live in this world either. But I don't know. I wish you were right. I wish there was any sort of hope that, Israel would do anything other than just buy time and wait for the next opportunity to expand their borders. But, they could start by declaring their fucking borders. How about that? This is Israel. This is our land, and we don't want to expand past it. But, they've never done that. And what political party is advocating for that? I don't think there are any. So, but
I would say, let me challenge you on a couple of points. One, is historical. You might say that it doesn't matter, but I maybe have a different perspective. I grew up in the Soviet Union when people were saying Soviet Union will exist forever and it will be doing this and it will be doing that, nothing will happen. But eventually certain historical, economic, social, political forces began to kind of dismantle it. And I remember when Yeltsin appeared, people dismissed him as being a puppet of communism, and he will never do anything. But he managed, to again, to the bad, to the worst, to the good, to the worst. We can argue, but things can change.
Yeah.
And even such a kind of power machine as Soviet Union, lo and behold, it sort of collapsed. So there are historical, economic forces. The same thing with Israel. They might feel it makes much more sense for us economically, politically, actually to make deal and be peaceful rather than keep on sort of fighting and fighting and fighting, and then getting some kind of more right wingers who produce more children who have to push more. It doesn't. And who'll pay? Who's going to pay for all of it? So I'm much more optimistic toward kind of historical forces which can actually redraw both history and geography and all other lines.
Yeah, that could be dictated to them. I mean, the United States could dictate that to them. I don't see a will to do that, definitely with Trump. But no, I appreciate your optimism. And I agree. I mean, I think political forces will ultimately destroy the Zionist project. And I think it's reprehensible to have an ethno state, that privileges people who are deemed to be Jewish over everybody else who's lived there so that's what needs to happen. It needs to change. And I think I'm optimistic too. I think that can change. A lot of Zionists are going to be angry at that change, but they won't have a choice. And I really hope that day comes soon. And I'm optimistic that it will. I know, Vladimir, that you gave us an hour and we are encroaching upon that hour. But I don't want to steal the last word from you.
Before all you do, I couldn't get a word in edgewise, unfortunately.
I'm sorry, Ian, you're right.
Well, I was going to ask Vladimir a question that maybe he could answer real quick. So it's fine. I did meet a certain Vladimir Bobovich, who is a Russian journalist in Moscow. He mentioned meeting you once, and he's actually not the first person to say that in Moscow. And everybody's kind of surprised how outspoken you are in favor of Russia, and also surprised you don't get in trouble for that. And I have asked you in the past what the student body thinks of Russia. So I will actually ask the same question about Palestinians, especially pertaining to young voters in the Democratic Party. You see the student voice shifting Democrats' party politics in the midterm elections.
I can see it. A lot of young Democratic, they're very much anti-Israel. Whatever they kind of ethnically are. I hear a lot of Jewish kids which are very much against Israel. So it will be a pressure and a change. But I think to be against Israel is one thing. To be kind of understanding the reality and wanting comprehensive peace is another. Because just to be either blindly for one side or blindly for another, I don't think it can solve issues. But I think there's definitely a change, because for a while, many, I think, American Jewish, American Jews it was basically their identity is with Israel. Now it's kind of shifting. They basically say, yeah, we're American Jews and we have our religion, but we don't identify ourselves with Israel, and we actually want some changes. So I've seen this kind of being outspoken, and I think it's probably a good thing. Whether this sense of openness and kind of challenge translates to the higher ups in both parties, people who depend on a lot of money, who are probably counting the bottom line, who probably don't want to rock the boat too much. It remains to be seen. But I think I still believe that there are enough sensible people who probably, like you mentioned, Billy Bob, this idea of ethnic state. Yeah, maybe it belongs to 20th century, but not to the 21st century. So it's basically Israelis have to rethink it doesn't mean that they have to stop existing, but they should probably, if they want to continue, they will have to refigure their configuration. They cannot exist on this kind of as a state which has people of second-rate people and kind of supporting it and so on. So they will have to refigure out. But I think also the rest of the world has to be helpful rather than pushing them further and further, and then they would respond with Netanyahu's, and the whole damn thing will continue.
That's a great point, Vladimir. That's a great point. And I know you have to run, so I can bump you off of our stage. And I thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you will come back.
I love to talk to you. I'm sorry that I kind of spoke too much, but next time I'll promise I'll be more quiet.
Well, you're the guest. The guest is supposed to talk. Yeah. Take care.
All right.
Thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Anything else we want to hit before we sign off?
Well, I can reiterate, the anti-Israel sentiment is really unprecedented in my lifetime. And the amount of criticism and open condemnation of Israel, even in the mainstream, I've just never seen it. And for good reason. What they're doing is the worst thing that they've done in their existence. I mean, there was the Nakba. You could say that was even worse. You could say that the war in '67, when they occupied the West Bank.
Civilian casualties. Not just collateral damage, but deliberately inflicted. Yeah. I mean, because the 400,000 civilian deaths figure gets thrown around a lot, but a lot of people say it's probably closer to 800,000, if not a million by now, because those statistics are old, and the reason we don't get updated statistics is because all the people who are responsible for those statistics are dead. Medical staff, hospitals, every hospital has been bombed. And that was a while ago. It was a year ago. Every hospital has been shut down. NGOs,
their ability to monitor and come up with accurate numbers is probably non-existent. And so there's probably an undercount and an understatement about the number of deaths and it's only getting worse, and the images are getting worse. You're seeing the images of, starving children. And so it is unconscionable. It didn't get nearly this bad in South Africa. And the West understood that, hey, our government in Pretoria needs to dismantle and have some kind of, coalition government or unity government, being led by the actual people that live there, the Africans. And so that's what happened. But again, in this situation with Israel is just way, way, way too important to Western imperialism for the West to do what the right thing, which is what they did with South Africa, and so the question is, how long will the West let this continue before they end it? And, the West, I don't think, they're fighting for their existence. They're fighting for their life on this planet, against these rising powers. And they're not really being moved by humanitarian concerns right now. And I don't see that they will, but it really looks bad, and they're exposing themselves. They're making themselves weaker because everybody's seeing that all their talk about human rights and all their justifications for all their empire and the wars, to save people and, spread freedom and democracy. Everybody can tell that that's bullshit now. So what we're watching, and which is, one of the reasons we named our show what we did, we're observing Imperial in decline, the empire in decline. And this is what it looks like. But big things are going to happen Friday.
What's that?
I was just going to say, I mean, every day we're seeing stuff, the decline play out before our eyes, and Friday is going to be a big day. Also where the empire is going to decline even further. But what were you going to say, Carlo?
Well, I was just going to say that there's some key differences between South Africa and the situation in Gaza and Israel, and that is the situation in Israel is fueled by religion, theology, by and large, by myths, and whereas the situation in South Africa, I mean, you couldn't accuse the Church of England of having the political leverage that Zionism has in Israel, because Zionism is based on a religious belief. That's far more dangerous. That's far more incalcitrant.
I would like to throw some nuance with your statement, and I would argue, I would say that religion is a far more important factor in the situation in Israel, but I wouldn't say it's the main factor, because all of the Zionists were not religious. So not a single one of the original Zionists were Jewish by religion. They were all secularists, and it's a political thing. Now, religion is harnessed and plays a role because that's how they get their support from Christian Zionists and from Messianic Jews who, believe that, this is their country that God gave them. Those are the myths. But that's not the founding predicating reason, of Zionism. Zionism is a political project that was beneficial to not just the Zionists, the Jewish Zionists, but also to the Western powers.
Yeah, but there was a cohesion that was demanded. I mean, what did they call themselves but the chosen people? Once you throw that out there, it doesn't matter whether you don't believe in the tenets of the Old Testament or any of them.
And I think more than half of Israeli citizens are not Jewish by religion. I think more than half the Israeli citizens identify as secular.
If you consider yourself the chosen people, it doesn't matter.
It begs the question.
That's what's behind the notion of Zionism. That's what's behind the notion of being Jewish. If you consider yourself the chosen people, then it comes naturally. Whether you believe in any of the tenets, practice any of the rituals of the Jewish faith, it doesn't matter. It's the fact that you are among the chosen. Look, there's 93 million people in Iran. Okay, they're Persian. Okay, how many people live in Israel right now? 10 million. 10 million. That's it. That's how exclusive a club it is. It's an exclusive club. You don't have to. The practice of the rituals and religion don't factor into it, except as kind of window dressing on the fact that you are one of the chosen people. Chosen by God.
Yeah. No, those are good points. And, little Israel is not, preparing to make concessions. They're seeing the geopolitical shifts taking place, and they are opportunistically trying to seize upon this moment to further their Zionist agenda, which is to, annex the West Bank. I guess Trump recently shifted and said that the occupation of the West Bank is not illegal. And he said the settlements are a legitimate part of Israel. He changed U.S., the official U.S. position. They're hoping to ethnically cleanse Gaza and to annex Gaza. And so they're just, really opportunistically pursuing this greater Israel project right now more than ever. But they know that they cannot do anything against Iran on their own. They need to drag the United States in a much bigger way. And so that is what we were going to see play out in this year, next year, the next few years is Israeli efforts to do that. And so I think Ian's absolutely right that we could see something, by the end of September, by the end of August, another kind of attack in order to try and draw the United States in. But
I'm of the opinion that it's going to be later than that. I mean, I might be mistaken, but I think it's going to be later because it's going to take time to. It's also going to take time to restock the missile stores that were partially depleted in the previous 12-day war, or however long it was, with Iran. And also, if you look at the Iraq war, because Iraq was the last major ground invasion. that the USA didn't. So if we're assuming, so it might be, I mean, so if it's just a very quick, but the thing is, airstrikes aren't going to do it. I mean, even Yemen, I mean, they've bombed Yemen repeatedly and it's done nothing. I think they understand that now. It's basically virtue signaling to bomb someone at this point. I mean, not to say it doesn't kill people and it doesn't cause real loss of life and damage, but as far as their military effectiveness and their economy, it does nothing. You have to actually put boots on the ground and invade them. And so if they want, the final solution to the, Iran question, they have to put boots on the ground. And I think that's what Israel's probably pushing for. You need to put, you need to invade them through Pakistan, send troops through Pakistan and attack Iran that
Syria,
way.
I think through Syria and then maybe.
Well, you got Iraq. That's the problem. Iraq is a bit of a problem.
Isn't there? Doesn't Iran and Syria share a border?
A very small one. A very small one. They do technically they have a border, but it's like, well, it's a little predictable. I don't know, but I don't work in the Pentagon. I can't say how they would approach it, but they do absolutely control the airspace with Assad's military gun. They will definitely launch, west to east air attacks that way.
But no, I can see Jolani. I mean, I think I have seen an interview with Jolani from years ago where he was saying ultimately this is the plan is to take out the Iranian what are Sunni Shia are seen as like heretics, right? He didn't use the word heretic, but that's what he was suggesting that
that is the official ISIS position, and that's what pro-Iran and Iranian sources make fun of, that ISIS is this pure Islamic movement who attacks everybody except Israel for some reason, which is literally closer to them than Iran, but they attack everybody except Israel and the USA. But if they do that,
tech theories.
If they do that, and I actually wrote a post yesterday on Quora, actually, and I said that I think we're not going to see a large-scale attack on Iran probably until after the U.S. midterms, because that was kind of the timeline they followed with Iraq. They're making noise. I mean, pretty soon, they barely attacked Afghanistan, and the Bush people, Carlos' favorite people, the Bush neocons, were already talking about, we got to invade Iraq too. And then, but it didn't actually materialize until 2003, after the 2002 midterms. And the thing about that is it shifted from, the Democrats lost 7 or 8 seats. Republicans gained 8 seats. It was a pretty big red wave, if you will, and that was widely interpreted at the time as the electorate, the voters, largely approving of the idea. So I think we're going to see something similar with Iran.
Now, that's this November, right? This November is the first.
It's November? I thought it was next year. I could be mistaken.
Okay, no. Well, there's always elections going on.
Well, there's elections every year, but there's big.
You're referring to November 2026.
Yes.
So you're thinking nothing big until after that takes place, which makes sense.
Well,
I mean,
right. It doesn't mean they're necessarily, we have to wait till after this big election. I'm not saying that's the deliberate timetable, but I think they'll take it as a milestone, because they're building public support. They're putting out these, because I see them like almost every day from like CNN. I don't pay too much attention to Fox News. It's kind of ironic, Republican and conservative outlets being less pro-war than liberal ones these days. But, I see those articles every couple of days, like, oh, Iran's doing this. It's the only time liberal outlets say something positive about Trump is when he's ranting about Iran. It's like when he bombed Syria, they were like, oh, it's presidential. Like that was like the only good thing Trump did in his first term, is, from liberals' point of view, was bombing Syria. But I see, their nukes are doing this, Iran's doing this, Iran's doing that. And so I think there's going to be some consensus building in the media, and that's going to take a while. In addition to all of the physical factors that they need to have lined up before they actually attack Iran. So I think it's going to be gradual. It's not going to be a quick process because I think we've fallen into this habit of, because we have this 24/7 news cycle, we expect things to happen right now. But I think it's going to take a while. So I think, maybe late, probably not even next year, probably the year after next year, we'll see some major. I'm not to say there won't be smaller, shaping operations against Iran. But
and also that's the same timetable for Iran to supposedly reconstitute their nuclear program, because everybody says it was set back maybe a year or so through the bombing, and so they could really bring that story back, in a year and a few months, and say, hey, we've got to attack again because Iran's, doing their nuclear thing again. Trump says
their Iran's nuclear program is permanently destroyed. It's
obliterated.
Gone.
It has been obliterated. Yeah, but
obliterated, except it's not right.
He's never seen obliteration like
it. In a year.
This is not a fool.
On one hand, I like what he's saying, because if that's true, great. We don't need to bomb Iran anymore, and that's kind of what he's trying to do. I don't think Trump wants to bomb Iran. He doesn't want to get into a big war, and so he's insisting that the war is not necessary because of his valiant effort to obliterate it. But I don't really mind that rhetoric. I mean, that's because, again, it's to shut the warmongers up and to insist that we don't need to attack Iran anymore. But you do have those warmongers that want the United States to literally wipe Iran off the map. And until we use the entirety of our nuclear arsenal and turn Iran into a glass surface, they're not going to be happy.
And they use the Iraqi technique of yellow cake and weapons of mass destruction by lying about the fact that Iran is producing trying to produce a nuclear
weapon. They're an imminent nuclear threat. They're going to nuke Europe in 2 days if we don't do this.
Yep.
Well, I appreciate Vladimir. He's a good sport. We argue very heatedly on things on Facebook, and it's so he's a good sport to come back on despite our heated disagreements via text. But I like his opinions. I don't really, agree with some of them, but he's a good articulate spokesperson. And because he did live in the former Soviet Union, he's got some interesting perspective. I'm good starting to wrap up, unless you guys want to open up a discussion on another topic or say some final thoughts on anything that we've discussed so far.
Yeah. I got to go back to that. I have to go back to that hellscape, Washington, D.C., where crime is so high, they have to build $200 million ballrooms so that they can hide out in them, apparently.
Yeah, you mentioned before the show, you were talking about Trump and his crackdown on D.C. and getting all the derelicts and vagrants off the street. And it reminded me to tell you, don't leave your home because you're going to be immediately identified. That was kind of a joke. But
I'm white, so I'm not really concerned.
No, that's true. Well, and you brought up the point that crime is at like an all-time low. Like crime is down considerably. And so Trump's just engaging in kind of, appealing to his nativist base that, wants to think that this country's problems are all related to people of color who are poor and homeless people.
Yeah. But they have a plan, and I bet they do too. We already talked about Oliver North's Rex 84 night train, where they use camps. And now they built those very camps. They're built.
Hey, and we've made fun of you incessantly about your warnings to us that, they're going to move people of color to the camps. And so we will, no, you might end up saying, I told you so, and we'll feel bad.
Oh, and I want to say one other thing about ICE. Don't be surprised that they're trying to pick up children at schools or workers at the construction sites. Because if they had to pick up the real criminals, those pussies would be so afraid they wouldn't want to have anything to do with ICE. They would go home to mama. Mama, they wanted me to pick up real murderers. Mama, I'm not going to do that. But ICE people have been appearing at elementary schools and trying to take children out. If you don't think those are pedophiles, you're naive as the day is long. They're pedophiles disguised as ICE people, or pedophiles that are actually ICE people that are going in and trying to take children out. So if you want to find the white slavers, if you want to find the drug cartels, go to ICE. That's where they are. That's where they work. That's who they are. It's all consistent.
Any final thoughts, Ian, before we close?
I'm sorry, I keep leaving. My dog got into the bedroom, and because I came back by bus from Crimea the other day, and I had some cookies, and I ate most of them. I left them in a bag, and then they were sitting in the bedroom, and unfortunately, my dog found them, and so it took me a couple trips to figure out what he's doing, but yeah, I eventually found the empty bag. No more cookies. So I hope you enjoyed them. So sorry about that. But yeah, no, I got no closing thoughts.
Okay.
What we said.
That sounds like something Spaz would do. Is he part hound? Does he have really good sense of smell?
Well, he's a beagle. So beagles are renowned for being hunting dogs, and he's also half Jack Russell Terrier. So who are very determined. Breed.
And intelligent.
Well.
Determined,
Yes.
intelligent. Carlo, was that it?
That's it.
Okay.
I had my rant.
Okay, we're going to shoot for an episode on Friday. We may or may not be successful in that. It would be nice if that Anchorage meeting happened prior to broadcast time, and we'd have something, some big news to talk about. But so we'll leave it up in the air. We may or may not reconvene on Friday, but thank you guys very much, and we will see you soon.
All right. Bye.
Take care.